so cold. I just gotta turn the sound effect off. Hello, my fellow hunters. I think it's safe to say that amongst veterans, myself included, the lack of a snow map was disappointing, or at least surprising. It's long been a staple of the series, though I find myself tempered by the maps that we did get. They are the most stunningly beautiful environments I've probably ever seen realized, and I don't just mean gaming, just full stop. They are works of art. That, and I always find myself being left cold by snow maps. But with G-Rank all but assured, we usually get a new map or two, along with a slew of new monsters to populate it. Not to mention that hot drinks were data mined. They're in the game, just not in the game. And a Monster Hunter without hot drinks? Oh, that's weird. I need my hot drinks. How else am I gonna have tea? And that's not anything to do with Monster Hunter. I'm just out of milk, and it's really sad. Either way, the plan for today is to discuss a snow map that will blow you away, complete with the creatures that call it home in this wondrous winterland biome. I am a big fan of G-Rank being a time skip. Like between low and high rank, it gives time for things to change and be discovered, so anything new that we do get, we could just be like, yeah, it had enough time to happen. It's a nice hand wave that lets things have a little bit of sense. So talking of sense, where would make sense for this frozen fun? Well, I think directly right of and bordering the Elder's Recess. Now, in the main map, that would look like, what, the ocean? But if we look in our room, there is a huge swath of land as of yet unexplored in the new world. And it is right of the recess here that I think would be perfect. Now, I realize lava-y fun into frozen is a bit of an extreme change, right? Though I will admit, when I first saw snippets of the recess, knowing that we hadn't had a frozen or volcanic map revealed yet, I actually thought it was going to be a hybrid. I was super excited about the idea of a central boiling volcano that you can weave in and out of the caves under scorching heat and then descend down the mountain to the outskirts of the map where it turns into more frozen tundra. I thought it would be a beautiful hybrid, but sadly that's not what we got. What we got's fine, but I can't deny how cool that prospect was to me. So that's definitely going to be an inspiration here, and when you look at the fact that in the jungle, the mighty jungle turns into, over the space of just a few miles, well, I don't think it's too out there to have this extreme change. It is the new world, it's full of bioenergy, things aren't exactly normal here, and with Zeno and Zora, it's not hard to make this sort of like, yeah, alright, fair enough, for the sake of Frost. Okay. I would have the top left of the zone, and believe me, I'm not naive enough to think I could just rattle out a map as complex, deep, and well-made as the ones that we had over many years of development, but I think the general ideas that we'll go through are pretty damn interesting. So the top left of the zone would be where it meets the recess. We would have a huge open area covered in snow that slowly bleeds away to reveal more recess rocky ground, like they are very much fighting each other for control of the terrain. There is this river that comes round. Let's say there is bits of lava pouring into it from the recess, steam billowing out, but then further on it starts to get frozen, creating a slippery pathway that monsters and hunters can walk across alike, maybe not completely unhindered. And then of course the middle of the river would be just right. Then we have the rest of the area. That would kind of be the central feature, but I would have little tendrils of lava that are snaking down from the recess, almost fighting the snow, advancing as far as it can, eventually fizzling out as it cools down with more steam billowing from the cold and hot conflict, and this would create this almost rough, rocky ground as various different lava streams have dribbled down and hardened over the time that this has existed. I would also pepper this field with geysers, have these blistering barrages of water periodically shooting up, making you really have to watch the environment. These would affect monsters and hunters alike. Maybe you would take damage but still get shot in the air for a potential mounting attack, or do some ridiculous glider mantle shenanigans with the height that you would get. But essentially, imagine a huge open area that feels like a battle, a battle twixt fire and frost, each making claims and pushes into each other's territory, creating this chaotic mix of opposites, and has this huge unpredictable air that I imagine would feel like it's not just you versus the monster. There is a third combatant now in this free-for-all, the very land you are fighting on, avoiding boiling water, trickles of lava, frozen surfaces. You could even have areas of deep snow that slow you and the monster alike, much like being in deep water. I think it'd be a really intensive place to have to do combat. Imagine as intensive as Teostra's final zone with the lava going fucking everywhere. Teostra, why? South of that, then, I would like to have a proper frozen forest. Miles, seemingly, of woodland with snow clinging to the trees and the ground alike. Rocks and clearings where you can do battle proper, but the pathways in between you have to snake through the trees, and it would look like the kind of area you'd expect a pack of Arctic wolves to be running through. You could have a little grove with a little frozen stream and waterfall, making this quite beautiful impression as the sunlight is reflected off the ice and letting you do battle under its shadow. I think you could pull off some really cool stuff with a frozen forest aesthetic. And then we need the main one, right? The main feature, the mountain. You gotta have a frozen mountain, perilous yet beautiful in its own way. You've been seeing in the background some of the older, more frosty maps, as I felt like that was better than what I initially thought about maybe doing, which was bad paint drawings to represent my ideas. This is the lava, and then we have the steam, and oh! Trust me. You did not want that for 10 minutes. But they are pretty good, right? And both of them feature icy caves and, well, a mountain. You can either scale the outside, much like going to the top of Coral Highlands towards Legiana's nest, or you can go inside through winding, interconnected ice and rock caverns with plenty of dark areas where anything could be lurking. Think a frozen version of the winding chasms of the Vale. Either way, you eventually reach the top. There would be slopes of freeze to combat on that feels like you and the monster could go sliding off at any minute. You could have giant ice stalactites to knock down onto the monster for another bit of environmental fun, but the very peak of the mountain, however you've got there, would be one hell of a final showdown plateau, much like Kushalador's final area, but rendered in white. It would feel treacherous and epic, with blizzards blustering round, freezing cold winds chilling you to the bone, vision slightly impaired. It would be an intimidating place to do combat, seemingly on top of the world. And what I would love to do with this area is borrow a little bit from the forest and have a major environmental factor. You're on top of a snowy mountain. Let's have an avalanche. You could have a section near the edge of this plateau that looks very visibly weak, and with enough bombs or monsters attack hitting it, well, the very ground falls away, revealing itself to just be very thick, hardened snow. The monster then would be thrown from the mountain, cast down from its lofty peaks, and tumbling, billowing in beautiful white as it descends to the bottom. And what would be extra special is if this blanket of snow, then for the duration of this hunt, this instance of the map, permanently changes some of the areas you may have climbed through to get to the mountain. They're now affected by this deep layer of snow and rock that's come tumbling down, and then you yourself could do the most monstrous, gnarly slide in all of Monster Hunter World, following after the monster, not falling down like the forest, but just straight up sliding down the entire length of the mountain to reach its flailing frozen body and start wailing on it. Just imagining that would be so cool. You could fill the rest out with fields of snow. You could have a frozen lake that maybe can break away and slowly freeze back, so the actual available land to stand on keeps fluctuating as you fight. You could even have very fine powdery snow pockets that are surprisingly deep. A hunter can walk across them with no worries due to them being quite light, but a monster will sink deep, lose its footing, and half be buried in snow, acting as a pseudo-environmental pitfall trap. Not quite as effective as the real thing, but that would also be a really cool way of adding in environmentals, even letting them fall shattering through ice into a frozen lake, flailing around as they try and get out. Maybe it exhausts them as the cold really chills them. A way to artificially, environmentally exhaust a monster, I think, would be a unique thing to bring to the table. So that's my general TLDR. I know it's not the best, but I think it's a good basis for something we can work with, right? You'd have plenty of natural wildlife here. You could throw in Kelby, you could have the Popo finally, that would be cool, and there's plenty of frozen herbivores to provide a food source, and just imagine what they could do with some beautiful cold-based endemic life. You could really set up a proper ecosystem here, lots of burrowing animals that live deep under the snow, and to that end, let's talk about the monsters, because let's be honest, it's all well and good having a pretty map, but is it even worth getting out of bed in the morning if you can't kill something and wear its skin? I mean, am I right? I'm right. I would have, as the other maps do, a tiered system. You got your apex, you got your kind of mid-tiers, and then you got your fodder. Your trash fodder. So I would have a double apex scenario here, kind of like in the Coral Highlands, where if a Dogron is present, he kind of takes the role of apex, and if Legiana is present, then she does. I would have obviously Legiana here as the only ice monster. It kind of makes too much sense, and the thing is, when thinking of monsters to put into this map, you have to choose monsters that belong to existing skeletons in the game. There is no indication we will ever get something that's based on a monster type we don't have. No amphibians, no insects, no pseudo-wyverns. It's just sadly probably not going to happen, so we have to take that into consideration if this is going to be a realistic design. So let's have Legiana, but Legiana wouldn't actually like this that much. Yes, she can handle cold, she generates it, but she's got a good thing going in the Highlands, a good food source, unchallenged essentially. Why fly to this frozen wasteland? Well, I think this would be a good time to introduce a subspecies. So I call this then the Snowcloak Legiana. Living in this more frigid environment, she has a much more brilliant white pigment of skin, losing some patterning, and essentially gets that polar bear theme going on to camo beautifully in with the snow. Able to fly silently like an owl, she scours the barrenness for signs of life from above. Now, a Legiana can generate ice by super chilling the air immediately next to her skin, and then the ice that forms from that on her body she flings at enemies. Now that the environment itself is frozen, the volume of ice she can create should be greatly increased, enhancing her ice attacks, increasing their area and effectiveness, giving her access to some new ones, using her new style of hunting. And what would that new style of hunting be? Well, meet the Arctic fox. This is an adorable creature and has an awesome hunting style. It will use its incredible hearing to sense the slightest movements and sounds under the snow from a tiny little mammal. It will then jump in the air and use the momentum to plunge deep into the snow and hopefully grab it in its claws. It's quite neat, right? So imagine Legiana doing this, but in a much more diving fashion. Let's say that a good part of this zone is hugely deep snow, almost like a snow sea, right? We've had sand seas in Monster Hunter with creatures swimming through it. Let's give Legiana the ability to essentially act like the many seabirds that can dive underwater, grab a fish, and then come back up. But in this case, it's snow. Imagine seeing this beautiful, glistening white Legiana dive deep under powdery snow, disappear from view, go round in an arc, and come bursting out with prismatic brilliance as the light reflects over all the ice crystals, now propelled into the air with a little mammal grasped in her talons. Oh, what a sight! And then we could obviously apply this to combat. She's in the air, firing frost, suddenly folds her wings in, dives straight down and plunges onto the snow and comes bursting out near you, borrowing a little bit from good old Diablos, but with frost infusion. How badass would that be as her unique little gimmick, and also would let her work well in this environment as an animal. As for the apex that she can share the zone with, one that wouldn't be a subspecies that maybe is there more commonly, well, I think we'd have to have a new monster for that, right? And It's tricky. See, you'd want a yang to Legiana's yin, so we have flying grace, we want grounded brute, so I guess if we had Odogaron, but instead of being about speed, we make it more about bulk and power. Essentially, imagine Nergigante's skeleton and type movements, not an elder dragon, and let's give it a more fur aesthetic, and kind of end up with a monstrous polar bear. I think expanded upon, that would be a nice way to do it. A very powerful ground-based animal that's quite the tank. Not as extreme as Gammoth, but in that kind of direction. So while they can't really be hunted by Legiana, they can't really get back at Legiana in the air, and they have this sort of stalemate as two powerful creatures. It would sort of make sense then that they're sharing what they can, as neither can really kill the other in a straight-up fight. Yeah, I'm totally with that. Look, I can't spend a subsection of a video inventing an entirely new monster, or we'll be here until bloody Christmas. Alright, so, the mid-tiers then. You gotta have Jade Barroth, right? Add to the subspecies, let's add in Jade Barroth. Instead of this murky bone crown, he's got this beautiful crystal jade. Instead of mud, he coats himself in snow and shakes that off and turns you into a little snowman, and your movement's super impaired. He's slightly bigger, more aggressive, more powerful. I mean, it's Barroth, but he looks nicer and uses snow.
Genius!
For the other sort of mid-tier monster on this map then, bear in mind we have to use existing skeletons. Let's go to the Flying Wyvern camp and go for Khezu. Essentially, someone took a gecko, merged it with a leech, and then struck it with lightning to power it up. This thing has sucky pads that let it crawl around on ceilings and walls, fits perfectly into the icy caves, is super silent, drips acidic saliva, and really makes use of that foreboding dark crevices as it tries to slowly find its way above you and then slowly stretch out its rubbery neck, enclosing its mouth and consuming you whole like a snake. This thing is freaky. It's got no eyes. It sniffs the air violently. Like, you do not know the meaning of violent sniffing until you fight a Khezu. It roars constantly. It won't shut the fuck up once you've started fighting. But haha. And of course, it has the best soundtrack in all of Monster Hunter. Seriously, how good was that? Look, let me just play it again. Oh, I could listen to that for days. It's silent. There's no music when you fight this guy. It's like really eerie. It's kind of a unique little twist that they did with him, because, you know, he's supposed to be that ghostly quiet, rubbery, blubbery skin that's super stretchy and malleable, and, you know, he can generate thunderous amounts of electricity, firing at you in great balls, coating his body in it and charging at you, whipping his neck round to slam into you and break ribs. He is a very freaky monster, but obviously the most terrifying thing about him is So yeah, I think Khezu would work well. He'd add a nice little bit of variety, the electricity is cool, he's very creepy, would work with the caves, and generally meld with the other creatures that we're putting on the map. You could see him go for Jade Barroth and have an almost Geratodus-like interaction in terms of their turf war. I think that would be really fantastic. As for the lowest tier monster on the map, I think we'd take inspiration from Odogaron. Introducing Snowdogaron, like, Snowdogaron. That was the entire purpose of this video! Okay, but like what I'm getting at is a smaller, more agile fanged wyvern, not roly-poly Jagras Dodo, not even like Gyros, something that uses its pack properly. It's more wolf-like, maybe it's got a bit of fur. Essentially, someone threw a Komodo dragon at a wolf and they fused and became stronger than the sum of their parts. But this thing fights with not as much savagery and speed as Odo, but it's got the tactics aspect. Its little ones aren't so little, they still count as small monsters. They die in a couple hits, but it summons them consistently throughout the battle, and maybe howling, calling them in, and it fights with them actively. Maybe it will do moves where it gets one of its little followers to hit you, so you stumble, so he comes crashing into you, and it tries to activate actively work with its pack to bring you down, simulated by a main great whatever we call it, and the little ones, because you can't fight just loads of large monsters technically at once. I think that would be really awesome, and it's not something super done before. There's been monsters that have packs that attack you at the same time, yes, but nothing that actively works together in a dance of death to bring the hunter to his knees. Actual almost combo attacks with his little followers. Yeah, I'm totally all over that. You'd also be able to fight Kushala.aura here, as he's very at home in the snow, and his tornadoes would pick up the snow and become frozen tornadoes with all the extra juicy benefits that provides. Kushala's tornadoes do this attribute adopting. If you get him to do a tornado on the fiery ground of the recess, it will become a flame tornado. It's quite a neat little mechanic. You'd be able to fight Devil Joe here, he goes wherever the hell he wants to, and the same for Basilgeus. I did think, right, with Basilgeus, his explosions in the snowy areas could actually make little puddles of water that are maybe slippy or kind of sink into them, and you have to wade a little bit because it melts pockets of snow. That could be a nice way to play his mechanics up in this area, because this is a G rank area, right, so things should be a little bit harder to deal with just all round. I like the idea of G rank not just turning up the monsters, but because of World and its enhanced ability to really weave the actual environment more into the battle, it turns up the difficulty of just operating your environment well. I think that would be a nice way to spin it. So let me know what you think. I'd love to know your ideas for this, how you like mine, how you'd edit them, all of that good stuff, and essentially, yeah, I love these little design discussions. I do think, by the way, it would be cool to have a little lake at the bottom of the mountain in the icy caves, just completely gloss black, a still surface like a mirror, somehow not frozen despite the surroundings, and if you're near it, it feels like something's watching you from just underneath the surface that you can't quite see. You could even have a more frozen aesthetic for the lower tier monster, maybe something that dives in and out of the frozen lake if we had one, and this lake in the mountain and the rivery areas near the lava frost conflict, and that could be kind of cool. Not a fish, of course, because Plesioff, you're never coming to this game. Fuck you. Just leave. But it would be kind of neat to have that going. Maybe a walrus monster. Oh. I'm going to go put on a blanket. I'll see you soon. Like if you enjoyed this. My name has been Josh. Subscribe for more. Oh, goodbye.
Rage Gaming with the video float.
But that's all that's really relevant at the mo, but I'm still gonna leave this up so you patrons know that I love you even though the outro's no longer that kind of relevant. But the new one's being worked on and it's gonna be a truly badass song, and don't worry, I won't be doing any rapping on it. I'm gonna go now. This was shit.